before you left for work yesterday, did your employer ask you, how are you feeling? Or better yet, are you ready to work today? Now, where I work at the Western Bulldogs, where I'm embedded as a VU Research Fellow, the AFL players are asked these very questions every morning before they arrive at their place of work. A quick show of hands, who in the audience had a restless sleep last night? A few people. And who today is feeling more tired than usual? So if you put your hand up in the audience and you are a player at the Western Bulldogs Football Club, chances are you may have your training session or workday modified, or you may even be removed from work entirely. Now for athletes, readiness to work or train is really important. It's important that athletes are in a positive state and ready to adapt to training physically. And by completing a series of wellbeing questionnaires on an iPad when players arrive at the club before their day of work, staff are able to instantaneously and confidentially pick up when players may be susceptible to injury or illness. So during a typical day of work for an AFL player, they'll usually have an on-field training session in the morning and a weights training session in the afternoon. Combine this with appointments with dietitians, physiotherapists, coaches and media commitments, and AFL players are fairly busy human beings. So they typically complete around 30 hours of training a week. As a researcher at Victoria University, I'm really interested in the question if athletes are ready to train. And we have a number of PhD students, honours students and undergraduate students who are helping to answer this question. When is an athlete ready to train, and when are they ready for their next work stimulus? Now during training sessions, on-field training sessions, AFL players are filmed by cameras that are located around the training oval at Whitten Oval. And these cameras film players during different drills and the amount of kicks and handballs and tackles that they perform. And from this vision, these kicks, handballs and tackles are manually coded by VU students. This allows us to gain a really good insight into what players are doing skill-wise during training drills, but it's a really manual, time-consuming process. So to overcome this, a VU Western Bulldogs student, Emily Cast, is currently working on automatically detecting the number of kicks that players are performing. So using this small wearable sensor, it's mounted on the ankle, and if you've ever competed in a corporate triathlon or a running event and you've worn an ankle monitor, that's how it's affixed to a player's ankle. And this small wearable sensor can detect the force of a kick. And using machine learning algorithms, we're able to then classify the type of kick that players are performing and the number of kicks. And this is really important information for us when prescribing an athlete's training load or training volume across a week. So we might be able to break drills up based on the number of kicks that players are performing. And if a player is returning from injury, we might be able to stimulate the number of kicks that players are typically performing during a hard session, or we can distribute these across a training session as well. Now, probably the most common wearable sensor in Australian football is a GPS device, or a global positioning system device. And as Rob mentioned earlier, these devices are worn on the back of players' shoulders in a small pocket during training and matches. And if you're an AFL supporter, you may have downloaded the AFL app and seen the Telstra tracker. And during games, you can see how much distance players cover that is captured from this device, and the top speed that players are performing as well. And this information is semi-interesting, but what we're more interested in at the Western Bulldogs is analysing this GPS data as a continuous time signal. And from that continuous time signal, we're able to break this data into discrete sections using time series analysis, which is another machine learning algorithm. So from this data, we can see where players are performing really hard, intense periods of activity. And this might be helpful in allowing us to decide when an athlete should maybe have a rest on the bench, or maybe for prescribing future training load as well. So it's really important to get the balance of training load, athlete training load right. Too much training load, and it might be too much of a stimulus for an athlete. And they may be then susceptible to injury or illness. Too little training load, and there isn't enough of a stimulus to promote adaptation in an athlete. And that's really important for performance, which for us is hopefully winning matches. Now, information on an athlete's training load helps prescribe their availability for the next training session. And decisions on athlete training availability are often required to be made very quickly, and usually by a collective team of people. And often all the data captured from these wearable sensors and wellbeing questionnaires that athletes fill out before they start training is hard to combine in one centralised place. Decisions on an athlete's training availability are also made by a human user, and humans base their decisions from past experience, so what has worked with an athlete before, and knowledge of an athlete's training history, injury status, and so forth. However, these decisions can be perhaps a little bit biased. So humans might be biased in their decision on an athlete's availability to train. To assist in overcoming this bias, decision support systems may be utilised, and they're widely utilised in industries such as manufacturing. But in sports science, we're yet to utilise decision support systems to help answer that question. When is an athlete ready for training, and when are they ready for their next stimulus? And as a researcher, I'm really interested in applying decision support systems to this question. And I'd be fascinated to hear from those of you in the audience who are currently using decision support systems, or maybe using a time series analysis like we're exploring with GPS. So ultimately, if athletes are available for training and they're in a positive state to adapt to training, it allows them to be available for matches. And we all know that winning matches in an AFL season is really important. So at the Western Bulldogs, if more athletes are available for training and they're ready for training, hopefully we'll be able to win a few more matches, unlike this season. So thank you for listening today.